Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today we're going to be reading more of The Little Prince. Pardon me, it's like 6:30. I am a little crusty, but that is okay. I will read. The show must go on. Okay, here we go, chapter 5. Every day I'd learn something about the Little Prince's planet, about his departure, about his journey. It would come quite gradually, in the course of his remarks. This was how I learned, on the third day, about the drama of the baobabs. This time, too, I had the sheep to thank, for suddenly the little prince asked me a question, as if overcome by grave doubt. "Isn't it true that sheep eat bushes?" "Yes, that's right." "Ah, I'm glad." I didn't understand why it was so important that sheep should eat bushes, but the little prince added, "And therefore they eat baobabs too?" I pointed out to the little prince that baobabs are not bushes, but trees as tall as churches, and that even if he took a whole herd of elephants back to his planet, that herd couldn't finish off a single baobab. The idea of a herd of elephants made the little prince laugh. We'd have to pile them on top of each other. And here's a little drawing of his planet with elephants on it. We'd have to pile them on top of one another. But he observed perceptively, before they grow big, baobabs start out by being little. True enough, but why do you want your sheep to eat little baobabs? He answered. Oh, come on, you know, as if we were talking about something quite obvious, and I was forced to make a great mental effort to understand this problem all by myself. And in fact, on the Little Prince's planet, there were, as on all planets, good plants and bad plants. The good plants come from good seeds, and the bad plants come from bad seeds. But the seeds are invisible. They sleep in the secrecy of the ground until one of them decides to wake up. Then it stretches and begins to sprout, quite timidly at first, a charming, harmless little twig reaching toward the sun. If it's a radish seed or a rosebush seed, you can let it sprout all it likes. But if it's the seed of a bad plant, you must pull the plant up right away, as soon as you can recognize it. As it happens, there were terrible seeds on the Little Prince's planet. Baobab seeds. The planet's soil was infested with them. Now, if you tend to a baobab too late, you can never get rid of it again. It overgrows the whole planet. Its roots pierce right through. And if the planet is too small, and if there are too many baobabs, they make it burst into pieces. It's a question of discipline, the Little Prince told me later on. When you've finished washing and dressing each morning, you must tend your planet. You must be sure you pull up the baobabs regularly, as soon as you can tell them apart from the rose bushes, which they closely resemble when they're very young. It's very tedious work, but very easy. And here he is, tending his planet. And one day he advised me to do my best to make a beautiful drawing for the edification of the children where I live. If they travel someday, he told me, it could be very useful to them. Sometimes there's no harm in postponing your work until later. But with baobabs, it's always a catastrophe. I knew one planet that was inhabited by a lazy man. He had neglected 3 bushes. And here. Oh. So following the Little Prince's instructions, I've drawn that planet. I don't much like assuming the tone of a moralist. But the danger of baobabs is so little recognized, and the risks run by anyone who might get lost on an asteroid are so considerable that for once I am making exception to my habitual reserve. I say, children, watch out for baobabs. It's to warn my friends of a danger of which they, like myself, have long been unaware that I worked so hard on this drawing. The reason I'm teaching is worth the trouble. The lesson I'm teaching is worth the trouble. You may be asking, why are there no other drawings in this book as big as the drawing of the baobabs? There's a simple answer. I tried, but I couldn't manage it. When I drew the baobabs, I was inspired by a sense of urgency. Here's the baobabs. They have overcome the planet. And now we will move on to chapter 6. It's all in Roman numerals, so I want you to know that I am guessing every time. I don't know what chapter we're on, but here we go. Oh, Little Prince, Gradually, this was how I came to understand your sad little life. For a long time, your only entertainment was the pleasure of sunsets. I learned this new detail on the morning of the 4th day when you told me, I really like sunsets. Let's go look at one now. But we have to wait. What for? For the sun to set? At first, you seemed quite surprised, and then you laughed at yourself. And you said to me, I think I'm still home. Indeed, when it's noon in the United States, the sun, as everyone knows, is setting over France. If you could fly to France in 1 minute, you could watch the sunset. Unfortunately, France is much too far, but on your tiny planet, all you had to do was move your chair a few feet, and you could watch the twilight whenever you wanted to. All that text was in this cute drawing. One day, I saw the sun set 44 times, and a little later you added, you know, when you're feeling very sad, sunsets are wonderful. On the day of the 44 times, were you feeling very sad? But the little prince didn't answer. Chapter 7. On the 5th day, thanks again to the sheep, another secret of the little prince's life was revealed to me. Abruptly, with no preamble, he asked me, as if it were the fruit of a problem long pondered in silence. If a sheep eats bushes, does it eat flowers too? A sheep eats whatever it finds. Even flowers that have thorns? Yes, even flowers that have thorns. Then what good are thorns? Then what good are thorns? I didn't know. At that moment, I was very busy trying to unscrew a bolt that was jammed in my engine. I was quite worried, for my plane crash was beginning to seem extremely serious, and the lack of drinking water made me fear the worst. What good are thorns? The little prince never let go of a question once he had asked it. I was annoyed by my jammed bolt, and I answered without thinking. Thorns are no good for anything. They're just the flower's way of being mean. Oh. But after a silence, he lashed out at me with a sort of bitterness. I don't believe you. Flowers are weak. They're naive. They reassure themselves whatever way they can. They believe their thorns make them frightening. I made no answer. At that moment, I was thinking, if this bolt stays jammed, I'll knock it off with a hammer. Again, the little prince disturbed my reflections. Then you think flowers? No, not at all. I don't think anything. I just said whatever came into my head. I'm busy here with something serious. He stared at me, astounded. Something serious? He saw me holding my hammer, my fingers black with grease, bending over an object he regarded as very ugly. You talk like the grown-ups. That made me a little ashamed. But he added mercilessly, you confuse everything. You've got it all mixed up. He was really very annoyed. He tossed his golden curls in the wind. I know a planet inhabited by a red-faced gentleman. He's never smelled a flower. He's never looked at a star. He's never loved anyone. He's never done anything except add up numbers. And all day long he says over and over, just like you, I'm a serious man. I'm a serious man. And that puffs him up with pride. But he's not a man at all. He's a mushroom. He's a what? A mushroom. The little prince was now quite pale with rage. For millions of years, flowers have been producing thorns. For millions of years, sheep have been eating them all the same. And it's not serious trying to understand why flowers go to such trouble to produce thorns that are good for nothing. It's not important, the war between the sheep and the flowers. It's no more serious and more important than the numbers that fat red gentleman is adding up. Suppose I happen to know a unique flower, one that exists nowhere in the world except on my planet, one that a little sheep can wipe out in a single bite one morning, just like that, without even realizing what he's doing. That isn't important? His face turned red now, and he went on. If someone loves a flower of which just one example exists among all the millions and millions of stars, that's enough to make him happy when he looks at the stars. He tells himself, my flower is up there somewhere. But if the sheep eats the flower, then for him it's as if suddenly all the stars went out. And that isn't important? He couldn't say another word. All of a sudden he burst out sobbing. Night had fallen. I dropped my tools. What did I care about my hammer, about my bolt, about thirst and death? There was, on one star, on one planet, on mine, the earth, a little prince to be consoled. I took him in my arms. I rocked him. I told him, the flower you love is not in danger. I'll draw you a muzzle for your sheep. I'll draw you a fence for your flower. I didn't know what to say. How clumsy I felt. I didn't know how to reach him or to find him. It's so mysterious, the land of tears. Here, little drawing. All right, chapter 8. This will be the last one, and I'm going to get ready for my day. Chapter 8. I soon learned to know that flower better. On the Little Prince's planet, there had always been very simple flowers, decorated with a single row of petals so that they took up no room at all and got in no one's way. They would appear one morning in the grass and would fade by nightfall. But this one had grown from a seed brought from who knows where, and the Little Prince had kept a close watch over a sprout that was not like any of the others. It might have been a new kind of baobab, but the sprout soon stopped growing and began to show signs of blossoming. The Little Prince, who had watched the development of an enormous bud, realized that some sort of miraculous apparition would emerge from it, but the flower continued her beauty preparations in the shelter of her green chamber, selecting her colors with the greatest care and dressing quite deliberately, adjusting her petals one by one. She had no desire to emerge all rumpled like the poppies. She wished to appear only in the full radiance of her beauty. Oh yes, she was quite vain, and her mysterious adornment had lasted days and days. And then one morning, precisely at sunrise, she showed herself. And after having labored so painstakingly, she yawned and said, "Ah, I'm hardly awake. Forgive me. I'm still all untidy." But the Little Prince couldn't contain his admiration. "How lovely you are!" "Aren't I?" the flower answered sweetly, "and I was born the same time as the sun." The Little Prince realized that she wasn't any too modest, but she was so dazzling. "I believe it's breakfast time," she had soon added. "Would you be so kind as to tend to me?" And the Little Prince, utterly abashed, having gone to look for a watering can, served the flower. Here is this little guy, and then there he is, giving her some breakfast. She had soon begun tormenting him with her rather touchy vanity. One day, for instance, alluding to her 4 thorns, she remarked to the Little Prince, "I'm ready for tigers with all their claws." "There are no tigers on my planet," the Little Prince had objected, "and besides, tigers don't eat weeds." "I am not a weed," the flower sweetly replied. "Forgive me. I am not at all afraid of tigers, but I have a horror of drafts. You wouldn't happen to have a screen?" "A horror of drafts? That's not a good sign for a plant," the Little Prince had observed. "How complicated this flower is." Here is the flower versus a tiger. "After dark, you will put me under glass. How cold it is where you live. Quite uncomfortable. Where I come from." But she suddenly broke off. She had come here as a seed. She couldn't have known anything of other worlds. Humiliated at having let herself be caught on the verge of so naive a lie, she coughed 2 or 3 times in order to put the Little Prince in the wrong. "That screen?" "I was going to look for one, but you were speaking to me." Then she made herself cough again in order to inflict a twinge of remorse on him, all the same. There he is. So the Little Prince, despite all the goodwill of his love, had soon come to mistrust her. He had taken seriously certain inconsequential remarks and had grown very unhappy. "I shouldn't have listened to her," he confided to me one day. "You must never listen to flowers. You must look at them and smell them. Mine perfumed my planet, but I didn't know how to enjoy that. The business about the tiger claws, instead of annoying me, ought to have moved me." And he confided further, "In those days, I didn't understand anything. I should have judged her according to her actions, not her words. She perfumed my planet and lit up my life. I should never have run away. I ought to have realized the tenderness underlying her silly pretensions. Flowers are so contradictory, but I was too young to know how to love her." That is the end of chapter 8. So, I love you guys. I will see you guys soon. And mwah.